Hi, good evening, my fellow Coloradans. Good to have you all back tonight for the next installment of our digital job series. As you all might recall, last year we held the first ever Congressional District 6 job fair, where we brought in about 1,000 job seekers and connected them with 60 different businesses in the community, helped many people get new jobs or to move their career to the next level. We were really excited to kick that off. As you all know, unfortunately, we can't do that this year because there are just restrictions on bringing everybody under the same roof and bringing together large groups of people. We want to make sure we're abiding by health regulations. So what we decided to do was hold a series of digital forums like we're doing, both for employers and to address business concerns of business owners, but also for job seekers about how to interview over the phone, how to better their resumes, and a number of skills that they need as we deal with an enormous economic crisis and tens of millions of Americans facing unemployment. So we're excited to launch this series this year for the first time. We've done a number of these already, these webinars and forums from everything from, again, resume building and interviewing skills to what to expect as a business owner. So tonight, we're really happy to have Jessie Esparza join us again from the North Metro Small Business Development Center to talk to us about what to expect between now and the end of the year, and what you need to be thinking about to prepare your business and your family to weather the storms, both the health and the economic storms, and just some of the considerations, and also to take your questions. But before I turn it over to Jessie, I wanted to talk very briefly about two really important programs. I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, sitting here tonight, because we're working really hard to get an extension on the unemployment insurance program that expires today. There are millions of Americans and thousands in our community that desperately need that assistance to pay their rent and their mortgage and to buy food and their utilities and to support their families. We have to make sure we're extending that program as this crisis continues. And the other thing we're working on is some extensions to the PPP program that's delivered really important critical aid for our small and medium-sized businesses throughout the community. So we want to extend the program. We want to do another round of funding, and we want to change the way we implement it so that we're preventing abuses to the program that we saw in some of the initial rounds of the funding, but we're also getting the funding where it needs to be the most, to the small businesses, to businesses of 10 or fewer employees, and to other businesses that have been hit especially hard. And we're working hard to figure out how to get that done with the U.S. Senate. So with no further ado, thank you for joining us. I hope you find this valuable. You can always contact my office if you have follow-up questions. We have staff that can help connect you with federal resources and agencies, and we can try to answer your questions and help you out. It's one of the most important things that I do and my office does as a representative is provide direct services to all of you. So with no further ado, Jessie Esparza with the North Metro Small Business Development Center. Jessie, thanks for joining us again, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Congressman Crow. I think I really appreciate all you guys do up in Washington. I know it's a busy place these days. I want to just emphasize that here in Colorado, we are just as busy trying to help small business owners. I'm going to move over here just a little bit while I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. This is a presentation that, oops, sorry. That is really an intent to help all of you work towards preparing your business for the rest of 2020. We are the North Metro Small Business Development Center. If you haven't heard about us, we're basically one of 15 SBDCs in the state of Colorado. Most of all our resources and services are free of charge. We provide services in the one-on-one counseling for anything that you need to work your business, to operate, to provide, to get you set up for some financial assistance, to help you set up with some marketing, to do some operational, and of course, to help you manage all of what is occurring during this COVID COVID-19 crisis. So here is, my phone number and the the Front Range. We're under Front Range, but we do operate as a North Metro Small Business Development Center. You can go to any SBDC in the state of Colorado. You don't have to belong to any specific region. So just look up, the Colorado SBDC, and you'll find your region and have the ability to access some additional resources. So what we're going to cover this evening, I want to be able to just talk about the role of your business responding to COVID-19, the effects of what COVID-19 has had nationally. Excuse me. I want to be able to help you assess your financial damage, and there's going to be some things that you can do to work through that process. Redo your cash flow projections. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then even have a discussion a little bit about how you can redo your budgets, which will ultimately help the whole process of at least determining what's going to be part of your peaks and valleys as you go through December 2020. I think developing a strategic plan is going to be important for the next 6 months. And then even at this point, once you have done some of these things, to be able to consider some additional funding to have the ability to continue to recover given the situation. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't really know how this the virus is going to continue to affect cities and businesses. And as you have noticed, it's looked like it was getting better. Things are getting worse. And so we're just really on a day-to-day, week-to-week process of trying to get in front of this virus. And then I want to be able to at least give you some additional resources that will help you through these difficult times in the next 6 months that our SBDCs have put together and can offer offer you for some additional assistance. One of the very important components of small business owners is to really try and look at what is occurring right now with your employees, trying to seek some additional information, communicate, gather their concerns, get some input, and then I think implement some activities to decrease the spread of COVID-19 as best you can. This is going to be important because we all want to continue to minimize the spread and ultimately continue to maintain a healthy work environment. Because of course, when employees get sick, then it starts to trend downward and your business begins to also begin to suffer extensively, as you all know. So if there's any way that you can continue to coordinate with state and local health officials, continue to receive information about the latest issues. I know that there's been, the ups and downs on the testing, and I think that's still the issue that we continue to try to get more into the hands of the business owners as well as employees and the communities. I think obtaining timely and accurate information is another very important thing that is occurring. We're trying very hard to keep up with all of that ourselves at the SBDCs. So nationally, it was very interesting. There was a national survey that was taken, and we saw that in the first survey that was taking, 92% of small business employees were negatively impacted due to the outbreak of the virus. And then we saw that the 10 days later, we took another national survey and obviously noticed that there was even some more impact. So the difference between just 10 days, where we saw that 74% were impacted. 10 days later, we saw that 92% were impacted. My point to this is that in 10 days, we have seen such a drastic change. Can you imagine what is occurring now? There's been many more surveys that are still being taken as the months go by. And I think that this is just another indicator that a huge amount of businesses are suffering due to the virus. This is another very interesting component of a survey that was taken in terms of how long will you be able to operate your business under current economic conditions. And if you'll look at that, gosh, 1 to 2 months, it's if you add all of these, it's going to be a huge number that I think are going to be affected. And I think that's another reason, as Congressman Crow has indicated, to continue to try to assess what other resources that Washington can continue to provide small business owners in different impacting areas. And I think that's going to be very important. And we hope that that'll be something that'll come through quickly, because you know, some of these other programs will be running out soon. The effects of COVID-19 nationally, in terms of the measures that were taken, I think that we know that it is important to continue to disinfect your workspaces, continue to utilize the healthy measures of washing your hands and creating social distancing. That's very important, because those are all critical and areas where reduction can continue to exist towards having a healthy environment and continuing to grow businesses as we move through the next 6 months. So these are very important daily activities that will continue to be very, very important to many of you. And I'm hoping that that's something that you're all taking seriously as you move through this next 6 months. This is just an example. I thought this would be very interesting to note the type of industries that were contacted and the type of industries that actually responded to the survey. As you can see, the largest number were construction type of companies, but as you look through and down, it probably includes almost 90%, 85, 90% of all the industries in the United States. So it was a very good, I think, effective survey that brought us some good information nationally about what has been occurring throughout the first couple of months from March to today. And so now I think as an important aspect is, what do we do now? So one of the first things that is going to be very important is to start looking at your hard numbers. And by that, I mean that you must be looking at, and hopefully you're assessing and looking at information such as your cash flow statements, your profit and loss statements, looking at the data that will help you compare what has occurred the first 6 months of 2020 with the first 6 months of 2019. That information will give you some important data relative to where it is occurring and where those numbers are diminishing relative to some of your cost of goods, some of the revenue streams that have been coming in, where they were coming in from. All of that is very critical to be able to begin to assess, and you begin to compare last year's numbers. That will help you begin to determine how you're going to act upon July through December and have the ability to at least begin to be proactive. So for example, to establish the losses for each month that have occurred, but also look at the quarters, because each month may be a little indicative of what has occurred. In the example of what I said earlier is that things were getting better in the state of Colorado. Many cities opened up, and then things got worse. And so some of the data could be showing that it was beginning to get positive, and in a quarter, in a month it could have been positive, but in a quarter it could have been negative. So having the information from those different sources will help at least make some better decisions. I think collecting the sales and the profits and cash flow information is going to at least help you determine the comparison of what your sales were 6 months ago, what they are on a monthly basis between now and December, how your profits have changed, and also the kind of cash flow that is occurring on a month-to-month. And even sometimes at this juncture, it's probably important to look at how your cash flow is working every single week. There are other ways that you might also look at collecting data of how your business has been affected, such as, how many days have your employees been at work? How many, illnesses have you had? What has been, some of the clientele that has been affected by the virus and have not come back. I mean, some of those data sources are really going to at least be critical in making some important decisions. It's important to compare at least 2 years of your data with 2020. Why is this important? Because at least one of the occurring situations for the resources is that some of the SBA loans are going to ask for the effects of coronavirus in comparison to what you've been doing. So some of this will be really important to gather so that you have that data already in your hands when you basically begin to do some applications for some additional resources. It's important to collect client information from the past year as well. This will tell you in terms of the clients in relationship to how much they're spending and what kind of services that they're requesting will help at least give you some sense of whether less clients are buying more or less clients are buying less, and which clients have not come back, and how often have the clients that you had, how often were they coming back in relationship to how often are they coming back now. That is going to be important as you begin to plan the next 6 months. Inventory is another very important component towards your business for the next 6 months. So if in fact your inventory has decreased due to less purchases, then do you have excessive inventory, and how might you use that excessive inventory? Is there a probability that you might want to begin to do some sales? Is there a probability that you're going to use that inventory for some collateral? I mean, those are things that inventory can at least provide towards some decisions in the next 6 months to stay alive and stay within the cash flow opportunities to continue to do business. Also, if you look at your comparison of fixed costs as related to your variable costs from January to June, in those two frame of references, you might be able to get a good sense of what your fixed costs are doing to your business, because usually fixed costs don't change. And then if you had borrowed some money, or if you worked through some of the grants that came through, how were they able to provide for fixed costs in comparison to what you're going to need for July through December. Those are going to be really important decisions to make, and having that information will help at least in making those decisions. It will be important to do a projected budget for July to December. And then therein lies some of how you can use the data that you have collected. So when you start looking at all of the data from what we've just discussed, the projections of what your budget needs to be is going to be based on much of that data collection information that you've just gathered. So if you can do a July to December cash flow projection as compared to what your budget is, now you're beginning to see the difference in terms of what are some probable outcomes as you move maybe Q3 in comparison to Q4, but also as you move down through every month into December 2020. When you're looking at your P&L projections, this will help you at least look at some of the expenditures in terms of the employees as compared to what some of the loan programs have provided, and when those programs are going to end, what you're going to have to do relative to your profit and loss actual versus your projections. And so when you begin to look at maybe the cost of goods, if you are a product-oriented business, then really the P&L is going to indicate how the cost of goods are going to be expended or determined to be able to be used for the products you're going to sell. And so if you're selling less, then how different are the cost of goods compared to the first part of 2020 or compared to the 6 months of 2019. This is going to help at least for you to begin to reduce the product that you're selling and also reduce your cost of goods. Those might be things that you're going to need to really begin to work with. And I know that most of you have that pretty much already detailed, but just to sort of remind some of these little details that create the ability to work to the next 6 months of 2021. So therein lies the ability then to project your sales based on what you are doing and what you've done in, say, the second quarter, because the third quarter probably is going to be much different, and so is the fourth quarter. And the third and fourth quarter are probably not going to look the same, or at least in terms of the increase or decrease, but they're going to be very hard to determine even in a projections based on what is occurring with the virus and the growth of the economy and the decrease of the economy due to closing businesses again due to the growth of the virus, those kinds of things. I think it's important to work with your clients and determine how many are going to stay with you. So whether you're a service-oriented business or whether you are a product-oriented business, surely you've seen some decrease in client participation, client purchases, and or client needs for your services. I think it's important to look at these and begin to determine how this is going to affect the next 6 months. Obviously, it's began to decrease, so you're probably needing to determine how many of those clients or which clients are not coming back and to determine if in fact they are going to come back. Some of those are going to be important just to be able to plan out even into 2021. Obviously, whatever you do in this whole sense of gathering the data, creating some projections in your cash flow P&Ls, and also the sales and services of your products, and also determining the clients, what's critical is that you establish an exit plan. Regardless of where you think your data has defined it, it's good to create an exit plan where you can begin to maybe phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, look at additional loans and some borrowing power, look at what you're going to sell to get out of the situation, and or how you're going to decrease your employee numbers to stay within the business that you need to stay alive during this very difficult time. So once you have gathered data and you've looked at some of the critical information that is going to give you some power to make decisions, better decisions based on the data that you've collected and information relative to your business, now it's time to do some fine-tuning. One of the important components of fine-tuning is to consider, can you pivot and adjust this business? What talents do you have? What strengths do you have that can provide you towards pivoting this business into a new dimension and possibly creating a new product, creating something that is in a higher need, creating a service that is going to be relatively much more needed than what you had. I think it's going to take some brainstorming, it's going to take some risk-taking, and it's going to take some collaboration in gathering data relative to what is occurring and where are the new needs that are occurring through this dire situation that we have in this nation. So it's important to at least analyze your overall industry. What is occurring in your industry? As you noticed in the survey, the construction had probably the biggest impact. And I think it would be important as an example, what is happening in the construction industry? It may have still been growing, but we can begin to see the downturn as the economy worsens. And so what can you do, for example, in this industry to pivot based on the coronavirus detriments that are occurring? It's important to pay attention to trends that are occurring so that you can find the opportunities. And we all know that there's been some changes that have had to occur with some huge big businesses. I mean, an example is, the Ford Corporation shifted into, making the PPE providing services. I mean, I think small businesses can do some of the same approaches of working their mechanical services, their equipment towards creating what might be the industry need at this point. So those are just, one example of trying to look at the overall trends and focus, finding some opportunities that can create some better opportunities to keep your business alive. Think about your strengths and weaknesses. Redefine those in terms of the business, you as the owner. Look at the strengths and weaknesses of your employees, of your managers. Determine what might be some areas where you can pivot some of their strengths to continue to grow and divert some of the resources to changing what you're doing as a business for the short term, and maybe that's going to become for the long term. But that really is part of just thinking out of the box and attempting to continue to communicate, attempting to work with other business owners to determine where the strengths and weaknesses can support what you're doing throughout, the communities that you belong to. And so ultimately is, what can you do to adjust to continue to improve and remain competitive? As businesses begin to have a downturn, and even some going out of business, what position does that put you in, say, of the same industry, to take over and to continue to support those business clients in terms of their needs that they still have for some of the same kinds of products that your competition was selling, and now you have to step it up. So these are all very important in terms of some of the communication that you can continue to work with within your industry, within the communities, as you work through the next 6 months. So it's time, once you have gathered some good data, and once you have analyzed that data, and once you have determined that there is some importance in making some shifts and pivoting, it is time then to revisit your business goals and to redefine them to make them a little bit more realistic. Obviously, the goals that you started with in January are probably, and for most of you, are not going to be accomplished in 2020. So it's probably important to redefine that process, look at the goals that are a bit more realistic, and assess and compare what occurred Q1 and 2, because you had those goals, and adjust them to quarters 3 and 4, and then be able to determine that and how it's going to change your business plan. If you didn't have a business plan, you must have had at least a strategic plan, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's important not to abandon the plan that you had. It's important just to try to readjust it, because a good foundation of a business is the overall plan of your brand, and how you're going to continue to discuss the process that you're going to continue to go through, so that the goals can continue to be realistic and have at least an outcome that is important to the success of your business. Determine how and what you need to change that business plan. Now that you've got some data and you have collected information about your strengths, the strengths of your employees, some of the shifts that are occurring in your competition with your competitors. So now it's time to look at how you can change that business plan, and then begin to gather some additional data that's going to help you analyze, and then make the kinds of projections that you're going to make, so that the goals that you have made changes on can be a little bit more realistic and can be assessed right on a month-to-month basis. I think that's going to be important as a business owner, for you to have the ability to look at that goal on a month-to-month, determine the milestones of those goals, and determine how they're doing, how it's moving towards the intended outcome, or how far away you are even after the third quarter is over. That's going to be very important to keep close to the data. So therein lies that if you had a business plan and you did create some changes in the business goals, then really what you've done is basically you've created a strategic plan for the next 6 months, and now you have the ability to follow that into 2021. And ultimately, as you work through some of these milestones, the strategic plan will give you the ability to uh, assess, based on the data that you've gathered, how well things are moving along. So based on the new data that you've gathered, then it's a good time to establish the goals based on a short-term basis. And when I say short-term, meaning that you want some milestones to occur every month, you want some milestones to occur every quarter that will get you to the fourth quarter in a positive way, or at least to break even, and with the ability to determine what additional resources you may need as you move through on a short-term basis of your goals. Compare every actual cash flow that you get every month with what you've created as your projected cash flow for that month and for that quarter. Assess your monthly cash flow needs by readjusting and downsizing as needed every month. And that will help, at least as you work through determining that you may need to downsize, and then the next month or two, you're going to need to add some more resources and grow because things are moving. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how this virus is going to continue to affect every city, every business. So it's going to be really important to keep an eye on every aspect of your data as you move through month to month. It's going to be important to redefine your existing physical resources as well as your human resources. And by that, I mean, of course, the employees, as well as any physical resource that you have is going to need to be defined as an asset or a detriment, depending on how it's sitting in your business and how it's not being used or how it will be used. Given some of that information that you've just gathered, now, given the fact that you have a set of short-term goals, you've done some projections, you've got compared the actuals with the projections, it is now a good time for you to determine whether in fact you need some short-term loans. Given this information, it gives you a better ability to go to the lender, provide the data, and then begin to tell your story that gives the lender the ability to know where you're going and how you're working towards getting out of the short situation or the exit strategy that you have put together. It will help for you to obtain some workable grants that the cities might be providing in the next 6 months. The counties, I'm sure, will begin to continue to try to support small business owners through grants and small loans, and also the state. So in every city, in every region, there are some community loans, and I think those will be helpful for you once you know what the data that you have relates to what you need. So as you work through this data and as you work through the process, you may need some working capital to jumpstart your business into 2021. And it may be that you're holding very steady break-even assessment of your business, but come December, it could be that you need to jumpstart your business with some additional capital at that point. So it would be important to consider some additional loans, microloans, 7A, SBA loans. There could be some opportunities out there given that you have collected the kind of data and the ability to tell your story. You might even have the opportunity and ability to access the line of credit for your business if you can keep it positive. Or you can begin to access your business credit card to keep the short-term jumpstart process going. If you have accounts receivable, then this is a good time to determine what that's going to look like. Does your merchant cash advances have the ability to give you some additional capital? Will your inventory that you have give you some ability to finance that inventory to be able to use some additional capital that's quick? And also maybe even your purchase order financing, if you already have some extended purchase orders that show some additional revenue, they could be possible sources of some additional financing on a short-term basis. And we know that each of the options is going to have their pros and cons. Obviously, you have to evaluate those on the basis of your business. What are the consequences in the short term? What are the consequences of the long term? And you have to really do some analysis that is going to be in your best interest and the best interest of your employees and your business. So those are going to be important decisions, but with additional data and the kind of data that you gather will help you make better decisions and determine whether they are pros or cons. So let me real quick, I want to be able to just give you an overview of what the Colorado Small Business Development Centers have gathered in terms of resources. So I am going to get out of the screen so that I can get into the Colorado SBDC resource. So I hope all of you can see this screen. And the Colorado, up here you'll see coloradosbdc.org is probably a good place to go to if you want to find out about more resources that may be available to you. Obviously, we have some of the resources in the terms of webinars for the programs that SBA has offered in the form of the EIDL. Also the CARE Act. If you want to know more about what the CARE Act is providing, we'll continue to provide these and update these as we get them available. As we get them, we'll put them there for you to be available to you. And you hit that more, and there's more opportunity. This is about the Paycheck Protection Program, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the details. If you haven't already, I'll tell you more about the Paycheck Protection Program. And as Congressman Crow indicated, Washington is attempting to revitalize and open up some additional components of the PPP, as it will close August 8th. We're hoping that there'll be some additional opportunities that come from Washington to add some more resources or continue that loan program. This is information, I mean, we've set it up on federal options. Obviously, the SBA Express Bridge Loan will help if you already have a loan. It'll help you bridge some additional capital during this, drastic COVID-19 disaster. The Small Business Relief Program, that one is going to help if you already have an SBA loan. It's going to help you, at least the SBA, to carry the loan for 6 months while this disaster we overcome it. And then there's additional debt relief, and then of course the payroll tax credits that occur. The PP loan, you can basically see the very specific opportunities that the Paycheck Protection Program has. It's got all the information about the eligibility, who, how do you apply, what are the rules, but how this the loan is. All of this is really specific if you're looking at applying, and if you haven't already. As I said, August 8th, it's going to close. There are still some banks, but not very many, to be honest with you, but we do have some microlenders, online services that are still open to taking applications for the PPP. The the EIDL, obviously, the advanced portion of the EIDL is no longer in existence, but the EIDL is still open until December 30th of 2020 as a loan. It has the 30 years of payback and at the rate of 3.75 interest for that duration of the time. It doesn't have to be for that entire time. You can do it for less, but you can still apply for the EIDL, and here are all the information components. And then, of course, there's these other resources. If you're planning for re-entry in your business, there's some great resources that will help you to gain some information, procedures that the state has put together, OSHA has put together, some templates that you can use for reopening, and also some of the other variables of guidance that you're going to get from CDC in those areas. If you are looking at some statewide resources, there is a lot of resources that may apply, and it's always worth coming to this website to determine what might be available that is relevant to your needs. And again, there's so many resources. I want to show you how to access them. It's not difficult. Federal resources, we kind of talked a little bit about that. Loans and grants, if you're looking at employment, if you're in the marketing or in the tourism, some things that you can do to continue marketing. If you're in a business of manufacturing, there's some resources. Of course, the restaurant, artists, some of those areas. So I want to just emphasize that we keep this website updated as best we can. And there is a lot of resources, so we would ask that you visit them. Again, there's no cost to the website. It's all there for you to have in terms of your needs. So with that, my friends, I want to just try to see if there's any questions or that I can answer from you. I really appreciate your tenacity of sticking with me. If there's any questions out there, please let me have them. If you have questions, you can actually go down to the chat box and you can write your question and I'll try to answer. I think I have a question from Peg. Are there any loans specific for keeping people employed? Well, again, the PPP is still alive and well until August 8th. That is a loan that actually is a forgivable part of the loan. And if you have employees that you want to keep them working, you apply for the PPP and that will help you pay for the salaries of your employees, and that portion is even forgivable, which is really a good opportunity to keep that moving towards keeping your business alive. I would suspect that as Congressman Crow indicated, after August 8th, if for us to keep a good eye and ear on what is occurring in Washington, because if in fact there is an opportunity to revisit the PPP, I suspect that that loan is also going to be the type where there could be a forgiveness for the employer using the loan to pay for the employee salaries. It may be looking a little different, but it looks like that could be a really possibility. So keep that in mind. Also, there are some cities that are creating grants that can help your employees. So you're gonna have to keep really close tabs on city websites to determine what might be out there. I know Thornton has some, Commerce City has some grants and loans, and also there are some micro lenders. Colorado Enterprise Fund is a program that is in the ability to borrow money to help pay for businesses like yourselves to help employees. From Scott, I have a capacity to hire right now, but only for part-time. Do you think it's advisable to try to hire for these positions now, or should I wait? Yep, I think that's a good question, Scott. I would say if you have the capacity to hire right now, look at the data, as I had indicated. Look at what if your business has downsized, and if you have less clients buying your service or your product, try to work with the employees you have. And if in fact you can do that, then you're saving some cash flow to move into the next months that will at least keep you going. I think it's important to analyze what is occurring and then hire only as needed based on the data that you gather. That's, I think, will just really be an important part. And I think it is important. Obviously, you're going to worry about unreliable employees, because if you're hiring on the fly, then you may not be doing as good a job in doing the assessment of the kind of employee you're looking for. And so even if you're not hiring right now, it's good to start doing some assessment of employees. If you have the time, and we're hoping that with less, say, services or less products that you're selling, there may be more time for you to develop a plan that is going to do a better job in assessing the kind of employee that you want, determining the job descriptions, look at what the outcome of what you want, so that even though you don't hire them, you're still creating a good process to get that established And when you do hire them, you have a good plan in effect to take action that is going to give you better results. From Anonymous, if I have to close my business, are there resources to help me figure out how to do that? Yes, that's what we do here at SBDC. Ironically, and sad to say, I think in the last 6 months, I've helped at least 7 or 8 businesses close their doors in a very dignified way, looking at trying to minimize the losses by all of their existing inventory, their existing capital, any future clients that they might have had that they can be purchased by another business. I mean, all of those things can work. And if you do have to close shop, there's ways that you can work through that so that you minimize at least all of your debt in terms of what you have to deal with that. So I would say contact your SBDC and contact an advisor, a counselor, and they will help you work through that whole process. From Curtis, can you talk about diversifying products? I've been thinking about switching my production from tailoring to making masks and selling them in my store. Can you talk about that? Definitely. You know, actually, what's kind of ironic about that, Curtis, just yesterday I had a client that is looking for 100 masks and doesn't want the cheap mask, doesn't want, just the cloth mask. They're looking for some good quality masks. And at this point in time, those are hard to be found and very much in demand. So if in fact you have the ability to diversify and create something that is quality, believe me, right now in the nation, and I'm not even talking about Colorado or even your community, if you start working, and for those of you that are out there talking about pivoting, thinking about going from direct sales to online sales, this could be a way to keep your business moving in a positive way. So yes, maybe redefining what you do, selling masks because they're in demand could be, I think, a lucrative opportunity to keep your business going. Do a little bit of research of how that's going to occur and what you have to do and move right into pivoting. So, yep, that could be a very good aspect of the pivot concept. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I want to just say thank you to all of you that provided the questions. I'm hoping that this has helped every one of and the process of what you can do for the next 6 months. Please don't hesitate to utilize the services of the North Metro and all of the other 14 small business development centers. We're here to help you. As I said, most of our services are free, and our purpose is to help you maintain and grow your businesses. Thank you very much. Good night.